The US military just opened its most classified networks. The systems used to plan strikes, analyze intelligence, and make targeting decisions, to 8 commercial technology companies. OpenAI, Google, Microsoft, Amazon, Nvidia, Oracle, SpaceX, and a startup you've never heard of. One company refused to agree to the terms. It was immediately blacklisted. Here is what they were asked to sign, and why the refusal should terrify you more than the deal itself. On May 1, 2026, the United States Department of Defense announced something that was covered by Bloomberg, Al Jazeera, and The Hill, and then disappeared from the news cycle within 24 hours. The Pentagon had signed agreements with 8 of America's largest technology companies to deploy their artificial intelligence systems in its most classified military networks. The systems used for intelligence analysis, the systems used for targeting, the systems used to make war-fighting decisions in active conflicts. OpenAI, Google, Microsoft, Amazon, Nvidia, Oracle, SpaceX, and a startup called Reflection AI that most people have never heard of. One company was not on that list. Anthropic, which had previously been integrated into classified Pentagon systems, refused to sign the terms. It was immediately blacklisted. What Anthropic refused to agree to tells you everything about what the other 8 agreed to. The news reporting on this story was accurate but brief. The Pentagon issued a statement saying the deals would accelerate the transformation towards establishing the United States military as an AI-first fighting force. Over 1.3 million Department of Defense personnel already use the unclassified military AI platform GenAI.mil. The new agreements extend access to IL-6 and IL-7 classification levels, the Pentagon's tiers for secret and highly sensitive national security systems. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth told senators that AI was cutting tasks from months to days in intelligence and warfighting contexts. The story was presented as a straightforward modernization initiative. No contract values were disclosed. No specifics about which models would run on which systems were provided. The deals were described as agreements, not traditional contracts, which means they are not subject to the same public procurement disclosure requirements. The financial terms are secret. The operational terms are secret. The specific use cases are secret. The public knew the names of the companies and almost nothing else. To understand the significance of these deals, you need to understand why Anthropic, one of the world's leading AI safety companies, refused to sign them. The key provision was what the Pentagon called all lawful use. The Department of Defense wanted the right to use the AI systems for any purpose that is legal under US law, without restriction. Anthropic's position was that it needed safety guardrails specifically for 2 categories of use: domestic surveillance and autonomous weapons systems, meaning weapons that select and engage targets without human oversight. The Pentagon's position, stated publicly by Secretary Hegseth, was that requiring safety guardrails was equivalent to a weapons manufacturer telling the military who it could shoot. Anthropic held its position. The Pentagon blacklisted the company. Subsequently, Palantir, which had been running Anthropic's Claude AI models on classified networks through its Maven toolkit, removed those models. The message to every AI company was explicit. If you want access to the most valuable government contracts in the world, you agree to unrestricted military use. No guardrails, no exceptions. The presence of SpaceX, and by extension xAI, Elon Musk's AI company, on the list of approved vendors raises questions that have not been adequately examined in mainstream reporting. Elon Musk led DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, from January to May 2025. During that period, DOGE terminated contracts for hundreds of vendors and fired approximately 271,000 federal workers. Simultaneously, none of DOGE's contract cuts affected Musk's own companies. The Department of Justice dropped multiple lawsuits and investigations into both SpaceX and Tesla during Musk's tenure. The General Services Administration adopted Starlink broadband at DOGE's request. In July 2025, the Department of Defense awarded xAI a contract worth up to $200 million for military AI work. In January 2026, Grok, xAI's AI model, was given access to both classified and unclassified Pentagon data. And in May 2026, SpaceX joined the list of 8 companies cleared for the military's most sensitive classified networks. The man who ran the agency cutting government contracts was simultaneously securing government contracts for his own companies. This is documented in public records. It received almost no sustained investigation in mainstream financial media. It is worth being precise about what it means to deploy commercial AI on classified military networks, because the implications are not obvious. These AI models, GPT, Gemini, Grok, Claude equivalents, were trained on vast quantities of publicly available data, including text, images, and documents from across the Internet. When those models are deployed in classified systems, the outputs they generate, the intelligence summaries, the targeting recommendations, the threat assessments, draw on patterns learned from that public training data. Errors, biases, and hallucinations that exist in the models exist in the military outputs. The humans reviewing those outputs may not be able to identify when the AI is wrong, particularly in high-pressure, time-sensitive operational environments. The history of AI errors in consumer applications, medical diagnosis mistakes, facial recognition misidentifications, legal brief fabrications, provides the evidence base for what happens when these systems are deployed in high-stakes contexts. Now those stakes are military targeting decisions. The specific concern that led Anthropic to refuse autonomous weapons deserves direct examination. An autonomous weapon is a system that can select and engage targets without a human making the final decision to fire. The all lawful use clause that the Pentagon insisted on and that 7 of the 8 companies agreed to permits their AI to be used in exactly this context. The legal framework for autonomous weapons under international humanitarian law is actively contested. The International Committee of the Red Cross has called for binding legal restrictions. Multiple UN resolutions have addressed the issue. The US has a stated policy that humans should remain in the loop for lethal decisions, but that policy is not legally binding, and the all lawful use terms that 8 companies just agreed to are broader than that policy. The company that raised these concerns publicly was banned. The companies that said nothing got the contracts. The financial stakes of being on the Pentagon's approved vendor list are significant. The Department of Defense budget request for 2026 is $961.6 billion, with $33.7 billion specifically earmarked for science, technology, and autonomous systems. The 8 companies now on the approved vendor list have preferential access to that budget. Contract values were not disclosed, which means there is no public accountability for how much taxpayer money flows to each company. The stock market implications are already visible. Companies with defense AI contracts trade at significant valuation premiums to comparable companies without them. The financial incentive structure for every AI company in America is now clear. Agree to military terms, get access to $1 trillion budget. Refuse, get blacklisted. Understanding the Pentagon AI deal has both civic and financial implications. Civically, the decisions being made about how AI is used in military systems, whether guardrails are required, whether autonomous weapons are permitted, whether surveillance is constrained, are being made in contracts that are not publicly disclosed, by companies that are not publicly accountable for those commitments. The only company that made its concerns public was punished for doing so. Financially, the defense AI sector is now one of the most well-funded in the US economy. Companies with classified military AI contracts, Palantir, the 8 newly approved vendors, and their supply chain partners are structurally advantaged for the next decade of government AI spending. Understanding this is part of understanding where the AI investment story is actually going. 8 technology companies just got access to the US military's most secret systems. The terms of those agreements are classified. The contract values are undisclosed. The one company that said, "We need safety guardrails for weapons," was immediately banned. The company owned by the man who cut 271,000 government jobs is now on the classified network list. The story was on the news for a day. This is how the most consequential decisions about AI and military power get made, in the gap between what Bloomberg reports and what most people actually understand. Subscribe if you want to think like the top 1%, the investors, policy analysts, and informed citizens who read the document behind the announcement, understand the conflict of interest behind the contract, and ask the question the press conference didn't answer.